Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about what the minimum effective dose is for cardio training, both for like improving your health, but then also for a couple of little different running goals. Like I've helped a lot of people achieve hybrid goals such as 500-pound deadlifts, sub 20-minute 5Ks. So sort of speaking to the sort of running workouts or a week of running that I typically program for a lot of people with those sorts of goals that allow them to improve their running times within a particular time frame, especially those distances sort of like 10K and under, or maybe up to, even like a half marathon, without tanking any of their lifting numbers. Obviously, like still being able to make great strength gains and maintain or even improve their physique while chasing down these running goals as well. Like I said, classically, a lot of the people I work with, they're trying to crush anything below a half marathon, but really what's more popular is people trying to get sub 20-minute 5Ks and things like that. As far as the workout, I've been squatting like a little bit of a tosser lately, especially in terms of weight selection, so knees are starting to feel it a little bit. So just gonna start out with some feel-good stuff for the knees, and then I'm gonna get into some hip snatches, so we'll see how that goes. I'll probably hip power snatches. I don't know if I want to do any deep catches today. All right, so whenever I'm starting to get a little bit of knee pain, like one of the classic things for me to do is like one, just rein in my load management a little bit. So, my weight selection has been quite aggressive lately. So, I wasn't really surprised when my knees started hurting a little bit. Like, I think it's really rough when, some people just get this knee pain out of nowhere and they're sort of left scratching their head. They're like, oh, how are my knees so sore? But I know exactly why my knees are so sore. I had 3 weeks off squatting entirely, and then I just went straight back under a barbell, hit a set of back squats, 160 kilos for 5. My all-time PB is 160 kilos for 6. And like I said, it wasn't even just that workout. Like all of my squat workouts have had really aggressive or optimistic load selection, let's say. So I've just reined that in a little bit. And other than just broad spectrum load management, the other thing that I like to focus on if my knees are ever feeling a little bit rough is just getting juicy quad pumps. So gonna do some deep tier plyos, try to take my knees through a nice range of motion, but just make sure I get a lot of blood into my quads. Sometimes a little bit of blood into the calves helps with that as well. So just gonna do some deeper tier plyos, might hit a few sets of leg extensions or even an isometric or something like that. Let's rip in. All right, so just knocked out 2 sets of split stance deep tier leaps, and I'm already feeling the juiciest quad pump. And all that knee sensitivity is like immediately gone. It's crazy how little work it takes to just get a nice quad pump sometimes, and just makes the knees feel so much healthier. And like I said, does that mean that, the issue's fixed and the pain's completely gone? No, but it's just gonna get them feeling good enough that I can actually get through a training session. And like I said, just building some momentum with pain-free training, I think is so important when you start to get a little bit of a niggle or a flare-up in a certain body part or anything like that. Like I often find the quicker you can get on top of these things and just nip it in the bud, it's a lot easier. Whereas sometimes, when you continue to push things and you try to just ignore what's going on, that's when you can get yourself into some states that tend to last a little bit longer and can feel like they're a little bit trickier to solve. When really, when you reflect on it honestly, it was just like some aggressive load management and shitty decision making and maybe stubbornness on your end. So yeah, someone in my comments section asked me to do a video on the minimum effective dose for cardio, because obviously minimum effective dose strength training is something I talk about a lot here on this channel. And like from a research perspective, when it comes to minimum effective dose strength training, like we have some really solid research on that. There is really solid evidence of people getting stronger of just like one hard working set per week. So the minimum effective dose for strength training is incredibly low. Cardio, it's a little bit more time intensive than that. Like that is the trickiest thing about programming cardio and fitting it into a hybrid or concurrent style program. Like it's just, if people don't have a lot of time to train, unfortunately there's no way around it. If you want to build up your endurance, there's kind of no way around just, programming workouts that force you to endure things for a certain amount of time. So that is the big drawback. Even with a minimum effective dose, compared to strength training and other forms of training for other physical qualities, building up your endurance just is a little bit more time intensive than those other qualities. Having said that, if you're a typical power lifter or typical just weightlifting gym junkie and you haven't been doing any cardio, then from a health perspective, like you could probably improve health outcomes from just like, honestly, like 1.5 hour session a week. Is that going to give you drastic improvements in your health markers in the long term? Absolutely not. But I just think, you know, if you're doing no explicit cardio, just sprinkling in half an hour of zone 2 a week, it's going to get you moving in the right direction. Like I said, if you're an absolute cardio weapon, don't go jumping into my comments section, getting aggressive with me. Like, there are just so many people where the idea of doing cardio makes them feel sick. So many people have a terrible relationship with cardio, which is why they end up getting so addicted to just pure weight training and ignoring any form of cardio or endurance building. And so that's why the first intervention I typically recommend to these people, I'm like, look, just start doing any cardio. Hell, I'll take 10 minutes of zone 2 a week. Again, it's not going to do much to improve your health, but it's just sort of about getting the ball rolling a little bit. Like, honestly, if you're that time constrained and you don't want to spend more than half an hour doing cardio a week, you probably shouldn't be hanging in zone 2 either. Maybe you should be bumping it up to like some zone 3 efforts and things like that. But we just have so many people doing no cardio at all. I really like to start at the bottom with it. The same way, like, I work with a lot of general population clients, especially I used to work with a real fat loss sort of crowd. As much as if you're really serious about getting in shape, yeah, you should be tracking every single macro. With a lot of these people, I would just be like, hey, look, like, can we just start tracking your protein or something like that? You know, baby steps, and then you just ramp it up over time as you start to get a little bit more buy-in and motivation. So even if that little half-hour zone 2 session a week, let's say hypothetically it's not doing shit for their health markers, what it is starting to do is it's starting to heal the lifter's relationship with cardio and show them that it doesn't have to be these like really gnarly intensive sessions where you can like taste that blood in the back of your mouth. Cardio can be a nice, relaxing workout that actually leaves you feeling really nice at the end of it. Or maybe you can throw on some Netflix, listen to a podcast and things like that. Like, these are the strategies I've used to help people heal that relationship with cardio and realize that it doesn't have to be all out war where you're just breathless and feel like you're going to puke or something by the end of the session. All right, so just to wrap up the conversation about doing a little bit of cardio just to improve your health markers, it's just about how much time do you have, and then just trying to dedicate the time that you have available or the time that you're willing to dedicate to cardio just to knock out some zone 2, zone 3 work. The more time poor you are, the more you should be looking to push a lot of that work up into zone 3 and even the lower end of zone 4 maybe occasionally. But anything, even at a really low intensity, is better than nothing. All right, now let's talk about the fun shit, which is using cardio or endurance training to improve your performance and chase down some 5 and 10K goals, and not tanking your lifts or ruining your physique. Haven't snatched. I've snatched once in the last couple of months, so don't judge me if this is a bit of a shit show. All right, so if you've ever come to me for coaching for your hybrid goals, you're definitely going to recognize this running split because it's the one that I give to pretty much everyone. And so it's 3 runs a week. We have a longer run, which I typically call a recovery run. Not that it is actually going to do anything for your recovery, but it just puts people in the right frame of minds where we're sort of just, I'll either give them a time-based goal or a mileage-based goal. Again, how that's individualized is just sort of what sort of schedule they have. A lot of these people are on a clock because they just have busy lifestyles, so it typically ends up a time-capped, longer run. And our goal with that workout is just to gradually increase the mileage over time without the perception of effort increasing too much. Again, a lot of people ask me, like, how do I progress it? Like, you just will progress by tackling the same workout again and again and again with similar constraints. So a lot of the time it'll end up being like a 30-minute or a 40-minute sort of effort at a moderate intensity, typically around zone 3. One of the other sort of long-term goals for this run is to complete as much of it as possible around a zone 2. But honestly, a lot of people, especially if you're not that fit, struggle to get much mileage in at all around zone 2. So a lot of the time we'll start out more of a zone 3 based run, but over time it's nice if we can pull it back to zone 2 and still accumulate some decent mileage in that time frame that we've capped. Later in the week, they're going to have a little bit higher of an intensity run, typically around zone 3, even the lower end of zone 4 maybe, depending on their fitness levels. The time cap will typically be about 30% shorter, or if we're using it based off mileage, the mileage will be about 30% shorter. But the intensity will be up around upper end of zone 3 or lower end of zone 4. And then that third run for the week will be a little bit of an interval session, typically something like 5 1-kilometer intervals with a pretty cruisy work-rest ratio, honestly. But trying to hit up around zone 4, maybe even if they're a real animal, let them creep up into zone 5 if they really want to be a dog. Or often cap them at zone 4 for the first 4K efforts, and then that last kilometer, I'll let them go a little bit silly if they want to push themselves. And just repeating that structure week in, week out, assuming that you're sleeping, eating, taking care of your externals like your life stress and things like that, and not programming the strength training side of things like an absolute loony, you'll make great progress just getting exposed to those 3 workouts week in, week out. I honestly rarely touch that prescription, and people just make great progress for months on end, honestly. Especially if they're not an elite runner, which, like I said, if you're just trying to get your first sub 20-minute 5K, you're not an elite runner, you don't need any programming wizardry to fucking achieve that goal. And as far as why I program those specific workouts, why am I even doing that interval session? Is there some sort of logic or science behind that? No, I am literally just trying to get these people an intelligent dose of running. It's not absolutely wrecking them, and just trying to progress it over time. Oh, sorry, not even progressing. A lot of people think of progression as in you have to change the workout that's written on the paper. It's you should just get progress from regular exposure to those same constraints. If you find that you're not progressing on a setup like that, honestly, I'd encourage you to more reflect on how much weights you're doing, or reflect on your externals. Could you be taking care of yourself a little bit better? And then that's going to create that progression in your running. You don't need to meddle with the running workouts too much. That's a very conservative dose of running. Conservative, but still quite stimulative for majority of people. There we go. The other reason that I like those 3 different workouts as my typical running split for a lot of my hybrid clients is it's just a little bit more entertaining than just telling them to rack up mileage where they can. Because if you are trying to maximize your endurance or your running capabilities, ultimately it is just a game of how many miles can you rack up without destroying your schedule, tanking your lifts, or flaring up some sort of injury or creating some sort of chronic pain for yourself. That is the whole game you're playing. Accumulating as many miles as possible without shagging yourself. If you're really serious about maximizing your running performances, literally every amazing runner that I've interviewed on the podcast or just spoken to on a personal level, I'm all right, so how'd you build your base? How did you get so good at running? All of them just look me dead in the face and I accumulated a silly amount of mileage and somehow avoided a chronic injury. Or a lot of them did just accumulate mileage until they did get some sort of chronic injury, and they're well, now I've got an amazing running base. So like I said, it just sort of depends how conservative or aggressive you want to be about this, and how tolerant your system is, what your externals and all the other variables in your life are like. There might be some really experienced running coaches who are rolling their eyes at this whole conversation, be this guy doesn't know shit about improving running performance. But the results I've got from that style of programming is plenty of 500-pound deadlifts and sub 20-minute 5Ks, which is what a lot of hybrids want. Not claiming to be a hybrid guru. The other thing is, if you're a heavier hybrid, have some compassion for yourself, because it is so much easier to run as a light person. If you see, I don't really have any standards off the top of the head for women, I mostly work with male athletes, but if you're over 90 kilos and you're crushing sub 20-minute 5Ks, you're a fucking weapon in my opinion. Come on. Kind of cheating a little bit on that first rep, going down to a mid-thigh hang. Second one, a bit more confident, keeping it in the hip crease. Let's see if we can rip 80. All right, if you like the way I talk about training here on this channel, you can learn from me through GPP Level 1. There's a link for that down below. It's one of the best deals in coaching education right now. One payment at $350, and you're in the community for life. I think that's tremendous value to have access to me as a resource. We can review your programs, will just generally sort of mentor you through the struggles of being a trainer, plus all the pre-recorded content. The pre-recorded content's fucking amazing. I don't have any one-to-one slots available for coaching at the moment, but we're in the middle of revamping the GPP team training, which is, again, insane value. You get a week for free, and then once the free trial's ended, it's like less than $1 a day. If you follow the GPP page, you'll see that every single week, all of those athletes on the GPP team training are just constantly sending through their PBs. So you probably don't need, unless you're like an Olympic level athlete, you don't need much individualization to see results. You just need a decently, intelligently constructed program, and you need a supportive community of like-minded individuals that are all going out and getting it. So there'll be a link for that down below as well. And let me rip into this 80 kilo hip snatch, hopefully, and I'll see you next time. There we go. I reckon I probably could have gone heavier, but I've been a bit of a silly goose with training lately, so let's just leave it there. See you later. Thanks for watching.